Ladies and gentlemen, history is full of legends. Kings, emperors, warriors whose names are etched into the annals of time. But let's be honest, most of them are the same old stories of privilege and power, right? Born into wealth, handed armies on a silver platter, hailed as heroes for simply showing up. But today we're diving into the story of someone different, a real underdog. A name that might not roll off the tongue like Caesar or Alexander, but one that deserves to be remembered just as much. I'm talking about Flavius Aetius. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't looking for Aetius. I was digging into Attila the Hun, that wild barbarian king who terrorized the Roman Empire. But then I stumbled upon this peculiar name, Flavius Aetius. I thought, who is this guy with a name that sounds like it should belong to a minor character in a gladiator movie? But the more I read, the more fascinated I became. Here was a man who didn't just play the Game of Thrones, he practically wrote the rules. Flavius Aetius wasn't born with a crown on his head or a kingdom to inherit. No, he was born into a world falling apart at the seams. The Roman Empire, once the most formidable power on earth, was in its twilight years, rotting from within, besieged by enemies from without. It was a time when the empire needed real leaders, not just figureheads. Aetius's father, Gaudentius, wasn't an emperor. He was a military man, a respected one, but certainly not in the emperor's inner circle. So right off the bat, Aetius wasn't destined for greatness. He was destined to serve, to follow orders. Maybe, if he was lucky, to earn a little glory on the battlefield. But destiny, as we know, has a funny way of turning nobodies into somebodies. Aetius's early life reads like a crash course in survival and politics. As a young boy, he was sent as a hostage to the Visigoths, one of the many barbarian tribes knocking at Rome's door. Think about that, being sent as a child to live among people who were technically your enemies. It wasn't exactly a Roman boarding school, but it taught Aetius something you can't learn in any classroom: how to understand and negotiate with your adversaries. Later, Aetius was sent as a hostage again, this time to the Huns. Yes, the same Huns who would later be led by Attila. Can you imagine? This young Roman boy living among the fiercest warriors the world had ever seen, absorbing their ways, understanding their mindset. Some might say he was a pawn in Rome's political chess game, but I'd argue he was a sponge, soaking up knowledge, biding his time. When Aetius returned to Rome, he wasn't just a battle-hardened soldier. He was a man with connections, with knowledge few others possessed. He didn't just survive among the Huns, he thrived. And he used that experience to climb the ranks of the Roman military with a cunning that would make Machiavelli proud. But Aetius didn't just want a seat at the table. He wanted to be at the head of it. Through strategic alliances, ruthless decisions, and yes, a few betrayals, Aetius became the most powerful man in the Western Roman Empire, not by birthright, but by sheer force of will. Here's a controversial take. If the Roman Empire had more leaders like Aetius, maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't have crumbled like a house of cards. Sure, he wasn't perfect, no one in power ever is, but Aetius understood something many of his peers didn't. Power isn't given, it's taken. Now, let's be clear, Aetius wasn't exactly a poster boy for morality. He was ruthless, cunning, and more than willing to spill a little blood if it secured his position. But isn't that the kind of leader Rome needed at the time? While emperors threw lavish parties and squabbled over petty politics, Aetius was out there, doing the dirty work, holding the empire together by any means necessary. And speaking of emperors, let's talk about Valentinian III for a moment, the so-called emperor during Aetius's time. Honestly, Valentinian was about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. The guy had the title, but everyone knew who was really running the show. If Rome were a sitcom, Valentinian would be the bumbling sidekick, while Aetius would be the one fixing all the messes, usually off-screen and with a lot of eye-rolling. All this jockeying for power, all these machinations, would have meant nothing if not for one defining moment in Aetius's career. the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains in 451 AD. This was the battle that could have ended it all for the Western Roman Empire. Attila the Hun, yes, the same Attila who could make entire cities surrender just by showing up, had invaded Gaul, and it seemed like nothing could stop him. Enter Flavius Aetius. With his back against the wall, Aetius did what he did best. He outsmarted his enemies. He united a coalition of Romans, Visigoths, and other barbarian tribes that didn't exactly love each other, by the way, and led them against Attila. The battle was brutal, one of the bloodiest in history, with tens of thousands dead. But in the end, Aetius prevailed. He stopped the unstoppable, and for a moment he was the hero of the Roman world. Now, I know what you're thinking. With all this success, why wasn't Aetius the emperor? Why didn't he just take the throne himself? That's the tragic part of his story. Despite his power, despite his victories, Aetius never took that final step. Maybe it was loyalty to Rome, or maybe he knew that the title of emperor would make him a target. But in many ways, Aetius was the emperor in all but name. He held the empire together at a time when it could have easily fallen apart. And he did it with a style all his own. And let's not forget the influence of his father, Gaudentius. It was his father's military career that set the stage for Aetius, that gave him the foundation upon which to build his own legacy. Gaudentius may not have been a kingmaker, but he certainly raised one. Unfortunately, Aetius's story doesn't have a happy ending. In 454 AD, after all he had done for Rome, he was assassinated by Valentinian III, yes, that same ineffective emperor who owed his throne to Aetius. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. But here's the thing about Flavius Aetius. His legacy didn't die with him. The Western Roman Empire may have fallen just a few decades after his death, but Aetius's name lives on as a symbol of what one man can achieve, even when the odds are stacked against him. He was the last of the Romans, the man who stood between civilization and chaos. So, if you love an underdog story like I do, remember the name Flavius Aetius, because while others were content to let the world burn, Aetius was out there holding it together with grit, strategy, and just a touch of ruthlessness. And isn't that what makes a real hero? Thanks for watching. See you later, friends.